Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Opie grew suspicious of her close relationship with her best friend Kate's father. When he discovered them having an affair, he ended the engagement, demanded the ring back, and asked her to move out. He and Kate later learned that the fiancé had been primarily interested in her for financial security. Kate has since cut ties with her father, and their relationship remains strained. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I have been together for about 15 years. We met in the workplace, and we quickly found out that we enjoyed each other's company. We decided that we wanted to go on a date to see if our relationship could be more than platonic. While we were together, we had an incredible time and we started dating. Fast forward 15 years, we had two wonderful children, a house in the suburbs, a vacation house at the shore, and a perfect little life. I thought she was the perfect partner. She was always there for me when I was stressed out, and she was an incredible homemaker for our children. We decided that being a stay-at-home mom was going to be the best for our needs, so I took care of the family financially, and she did in every other way. The beginning of the end for us came when my wife had a bad fall. She managed to tear one of the ligaments in her knee and had to keep it in a brace for quite some time before going to physical therapy. Things were a bit different at the house with her limited mobility, but I stepped up and did everything I could to keep things as normal as possible. She seemed to appreciate everything that I did to take care of her when she was having difficulty doing it herself. After all, we made vows that said in sickness and in health, and I took that seriously. The time came for her to start going to physical therapy, and she had to go through it alone. This was at a point during a pandemic when only patients could go into medical practices. However, my wife did have a couple of Zoom consultations with her physical therapist, so I got to meet him during those. He seemed like a nice young guy. He was newly graduated, and he seemed eager to grow his client roster. He had a lot of technical knowledge, but I wasn't certain he had hands-on experience. I was apprehensive about him at first, but my wife raved about him after her first in-person session. If she was happy with him, that was good enough for me. She was the one going through the therapy, so that was the only opinion that mattered. She needed to go through several weeks of physical therapy so she could safely walk around without a brace on. It was a long-time commitment for her, and I knew she had been very nervous about the pain. But we were all very excited to get things back to normal. When I thought everything was going to be good, she told me that she had to do a couple more weeks of therapy. She had improved a lot, but the physical therapist didn't think it was in her best interest to take the brace off entirely. I was a little frustrated about it. I didn't understand why it was taking as long as it was. But that again, I wasn't the expert. On top of that, my wife told me that the time slot for her therapy had changed. She had normally been doing it while I was off work, so I could drive her there and back. The time change was in the middle of the day while I was working. She assured me that driving wasn't going to be an issue, since she was doing so much better. It was a lot of minor changes that kind of frustrated me, but I didn't think she was sleeping with her physical therapist. Being the supportive husband that I was, one day I took an early launch to go check on her at the physical therapy office. At that point, I was allowed to sit in the waiting room while she was in the back. I checked in, letting the receptionist know that I was there for my wife. I sat down for a couple of minutes, and the receptionist asked me if I had the right appointment time. I told her that my wife was supposed to be back there already, and she had an appointment with the physical therapist. The receptionist told me that the therapist I mentioned was out of the office for lunch, so I must have had the wrong time. I thought it was really strange. I never imagined that my wife would be cheating on me. I tried to rationalize it in my head to make it make sense in some way. I drove home not expecting her to be there at all. However, her car was in the driveway. I was relieved to see that. If her car was home, that might have meant that she ended up rescheduling the therapy appointment or canceling altogether. I walked inside and I found her in the kitchen having intimate with the physical therapist. I was in complete shock. Honestly, looking back, it felt like my soul left my body at that moment. I was crushed to see it with my own eyes. They didn't even notice me for a couple of moments before my wife looked over at me and quickly pushed the physical therapist off of her. I didn't know what to say to either of them. All I knew was that I needed to get out of there. I rushed out to my car and sat there for a minute trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Going back to work wasn't an option, not after what I just saw. My wife came running out of the house, and she banged on my car window for me to open it. After a moment, I rolled it down and listened to what she had to say. She swore up and down that it was the first time anything happened between them. She made it seem like it just happened, as if that made it okay. I was putting the pieces together in my hands slowly, and that didn't add up with everything else. She had rescheduled her therapy time to his lunch hour. On top of that, I saw her run out of the house without a brace on, so she clearly didn't need therapy anymore. She had misled me completely and lied to my face. I told her that I needed some time alone to think, and I drove off. I booked a room at a hotel in town, and I took the time alone there to consider my options. I couldn't be with somebody who would cheat on me. It just wasn't an option. The trust in our relationship was completely gone after that. Divorce was a messy option, but it was the only one I could see. I looked online for some good divorce attorneys and tried to snag up the best one before my wife could. I had a meeting with her, and we started to get the paperwork together so I could officially serve my wife with the papers. Meanwhile, the physical therapist who slept with my wife needed to lose his job. Sleeping with a patient was extremely unethical, and he could potentially lose his license over something like that. I considered that maybe that would be wrong because he was young and new in the industry, but I wanted to get revenge. I reached out to the practice that he worked for, and I told them about what happened. They were appalled. When they heard it, they assured me that he would be properly dealt with. When I went back to my house and started packing up some of my belongings, my wife confronted me about that. She said that because she was technically still a patient there, he could lose his license and that would be ruining his entire life. She was angry with me for telling the truth to his employer. After everything that happened, they were still in contact with each other. I didn't care at all. I gave her the divorce papers and packed some of my things to leave. We did eventually get divorced, and it was a bit of a mess. She tried to fight me on everything. But because we signed a prenuptial agreement where infidelity would void a lot of things, she wound up with nothing. I've had to keep the house, both of our cars, and most of our assets. I didn't need to pay her any spousal support or child support. Because I was the provider, I had custody of the children and she had visitation rights. Her entire life had been ruined because she had the hots for her physical therapist. So was his. I hope it was worth it for them in the end. Today's second story. In this story, OP met his wife in a Chicago bar, and they had a seemingly happy marriage until he discovered her affair with a coworker. After confronting her, their relationship collapsed and they divorced. Though she regrets her actions and tries to reconnect, he's moved on, leaving her to face the consequences of her infidelity. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I met at a bar in Chicago. She was with 5 people, 2 men and 3 women. I was there alone that night to watch a football game. As soon as I spotted her, I wanted to talk to her. I resisted the urge for a bit, but then she made eye contact with me and I was smitten. Her smile was so genuine, it made her eyes squint. When there was room for me to squeeze in, I switched chairs at the bar and greeted her. She seemed very pleased with me from the start. I found out she was with her sister and 4 coworkers to celebrate her 25th birthday. I was 27 at the time. I ordered her a drink, and we ended up talking through the entire football game. She joked with me about how I was missing it, but I told her I wasn't going to miss this gesturing to her. We dated for 8 months before we just decided to move in with each other. We wanted to see each other more often, and it felt like the only way to do that was to share a place. We both worked full-time, alternating shifts, so there were many days when we couldn't see each other at all, and a few rare ones when we got to see each other all day. Before I knew it, we were together for 6 years. She helped me through the loss of my father, and then my mother a week later. She always said I was her rock, but I could only see it the other way around. She was creative, even in her empathetic sadness with me. We spent hours each weekend watching birds, marking ones we saw in a book my mother used to write in. I was grateful to have her, and I decided to marry her. Of course, the first year was blissful. I knew it would be. To celebrate our one-year wedding anniversary, we had a party at the bar we met nearly a decade ago. She was still working the same job, along with her 4 coworkers, so they were there. Her sister and my best friend were there too. We were surrounded by loved ones and truly happy. On a Tuesday, my wife borrowed my car to get to work, since hers was being worked on. I had to come home an hour earlier to do that. For her, but my boss respected my work so much she didn't mind helping me out when I needed it. The next morning when I was leaving for work, I saw that my wife had left the windows down all night long. That was unusual. Inside the car, it smelled like cigarette smoke and cologne. Besides that, the gas was much lower than where it would have been if she'd only gone to work and come home. I had fallen asleep on the couch the night before, so I wasn't sure if my wife got home later than usual. At work I texted her, asking why the car smelled and where the gas went. She said she didn't want me to freak out, but she'd given a ride home to one of her coworkers, Jared. I knew Jared ever since the night we met, but I'd never gotten that close to him. Upon hearing this, I sent him a message and he confirmed that she did give him a ride, but said he didn't smoke cigarettes. This puzzled me. Instead of confronting my wife more, I let it slide and made it my goal to get to know Jared and hang out with him. We started going out to play pool and drink together on Thursday nights, and I invited my best friend to come along. I asked Jared not to tell my wife we were hanging out because I needed to figure out something, and I only told my wife I was meeting my best friend each Thursday, so it was a half-truth. Sometime later, my wife came home from work wearing different clothes than she left in. Her other clothes were in a shopping bag, and I could tell she was hoping I wouldn't ask or notice. When I asked, she said she just felt like going shopping and wearing something new. She did a twirl for me. I forced a smile, but I knew something was up. My wife always washed new clothes before wearing them. She started a load of laundry with the clothes she was wearing earlier that day and went to the bathroom. I stopped it and smelled her clothes. They smelt unusual, nothing like her usual scent. I confronted her about it as she sat on the toilet. She said I was being crazy, and she didn't know what else to tell me besides the truth. She said she just got new clothes and didn't do anything wrong. The next day, I came home from work just as a red car pulled away from our house. I asked my wife who it was, and she hesitated before saying it was her sister who stopped by for a visit. I immediately texted her sister to ask what kind of car she drives. She replied, saying a black sub, and asked me why. I didn't respond. Instead, I was doing my very best to remain calm as my wife and I ate dinner. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was cheating on me. I didn't know how to prove it without her shooting me down and explaining everything away. I also didn't want our marriage to end. We started playing Xbox together when her phone pinged. She read something, then sighed. Just as I asked her who it was, my phone pinged as well. She told me it was Jared, asking her to cover his shift at work in 30 minutes because he was unexpectedly invited to a concert that evening. I told her that was weird. Weird, because Jared had just texted me to see if I wanted to meet at the bar. She stared at me dead in the eyes for what felt like an eternity. I could see her breathing heavily. She said she didn't realize Jared and I talked to each other. Without missing a beat, I reached for her phone. I got a good hold on it, but so did she. We struggled as I tried to pry it from her hands. She kept screaming at me to stop, saying I was hurting her. I finally got it from her and tried to get away, but she tackled me to the floor. I shrugged her off within a few moments, so she grabbed my phone and threatened to smash it if I didn't give her back her phone. I thought for a moment, but I came to the conclusion that finding out who my wife was cheating on me with was more important to me than having to buy a new phone. I had to see for myself what she was desperately trying to keep from me. I dove into the bathroom and locked the door behind me. She continued screaming in frustration and threatening to smash my phone 2 more times before she actually did it, and pieces came sliding in under the door. My hands were shaking as I read her messages with someone named Adam. She'd sent him nudes, and he returned the favor. One of them included his face, so I knew who I was looking for. They talked about their intimacy, how good it was, and how marital intimacy could never compare to forbidden intimacy. His most recent text was asking her if she could come up with an excuse to meet him at the very same bar I met my wife in all those years ago. I barged through the bathroom door, smacking my wife's face with it unintentionally. I grabbed my keys as she screamed after me, futilely trying to stop me. I told her I wanted her out of the house by the time I got back. She expressed her disbelief, and I sped away, texting and replying to Adam with her phone that said I was on my way, and he should meet me out front. I found him immediately, parked the car, walked straight up to him, and punched him in the face. I asked him in an elevated voice if he just assumed I would never find out he was sleeping with my wife. A small crowd of people gathered around us, gasping and watching the drama unfold. He scrambled to get up, but I pushed him down at least twice before spitting on his face. I told him never to see her again. He finally got up and stumbled away, holding his jaw. When I got home, my wife was sitting on the steps. She noticed the red on my hand and started questioning me. When I didn't respond, she started begging me for forgiveness. She said she never meant to sleep with him, and it only happened once before he started sending her pictures and asking for more. I told her to get out of my house, and this time I yelled at her while looking straight into her eyes. I'm sure she saw no love coming from me, because that was all gone. I threw foam at her, and she caught it by luck, tears pouring out of her eyes like she was the victim. I forcefully told her again to leave, so she went upstairs and started to cry. She sat in her car with her stuff for an hour before pulling out of the driveway for the last time. She went to live with her sister, who was an hour and a half away, and she quit her job that same night. It's been 2 years since this happened. We're officially divorced now, but every day since she sent me a good morning text, among other things, trying to get me to respond or show any kind of emotion towards her. She hasn't gotten a new job, and she's gained weight. Her sister is on the verge of kicking her out because she has no ambition in life. She tells me all this in the hopes that it will make me reply to her, but I never do. I'm starting a new relationship now, and I know that when she finds out, it will break her down even more. She knows she lost the love of her life, and there's no one to blame but herself.